What's up, people? Welcome to week 2 of English 1101. I'm Mr. Byers. I feel much better than last time. I even listened to that lecture from last week, and I know my voice sounded terrible and awful, and I apologize. I'm sorry about that. Today is better. I have my tea. Yum, 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 yum. So let's get started. This lecture will be about 25 minutes. If I don't get through everything in this lecture, then there'll be a part 2 for you to watch. Okay. So I'm going to go through as much as I can. And then if there's a second one to watch, then you need to watch this like second one as well. All right. Um, so let's get started. Let me share my screen here. Okay. All right, let's go to the, actually, I guess that we should go to our homepage and get this up here. I want to pause for a second until we get to the homepage. All right, and we're back. So here's our page. There's my announcement. By the time you are watching this lecture, there'll have been another announcement in which I sent to you, this information. Weekly lessons. Let's go into weekly lessons. Okay, here you'll see week 2. It will be available to you by the time you have access to this lecture. Let's click on that. All right, here we have the things you're doing this week. We have the reading selections that I'll go over in a little bit. We have the assignment, which I'll go over in a little bit. And we have this memoir form, which I'll go over at the end of all this. The only thing missing here, which will be here by the time that you watch this lecture, is a copy of the notes, of the PowerPoint notes. Those will be here as well. Okay. If you go back to weekly lessons, here we have the list of assignments and due dates, which I'm going to pull up. I have updated this. Apparently, this one date right here, due date, said 8/21 instead of 8/25. So that was my fault. That's been updated right there. Okay. So due dates, things are always due on Sunday nights. Always Sunday nights. All right. So this date should always be a Monday, and this date is always a Sunday. And so if this Sunday is the 26th, then this should be the 25. If that Monday is the 2nd, then this date should be the 1st. So 9, 8, they seem to be correct from this point on. Good, good, good. This week 2, we're doing intro to narratives, definitions, and exemplification essays. We're going to talk about those. You read those last week in your textbook, and now I'm going to discuss them myself. All right. I don't know if I don't think we're going to get to parts of an essay. We're just going to delete that. And I was hoping to get to, so then today we will kind of discuss tone, definitely. I don't know if I'll have time in this lecture to discuss theme and audience. Okay. That might be in lecture part 2 that you'll have to do to watch, because we are going to talk about theme and audience. You are going to be discussing those things in your tone analysis assignment. Okay. So for today, I'm definitely going over, or for this lecture part 1, I'm definitely going over narrative, definition, and exemplification. Lecture part 2, I'll go over more theme, tone, and audience, which hits much more specifically your assignment for this week. Okay, so be sure to watch part 2. Okay, so let's get into the PowerPoint. Oh, we're not doing types of. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we are doing types of this. Okay, but we're gonna refer to it more as instead of types of essays. I think it would be better actually to title this modes of writing. That's a better modes of writing, and tone. Okay. So strategies, not just types. The things that you read about last week, simplification, narrative, definition, these are modes of writing. Okay. We'll also spend this semester talking about cause and effect, process analysis, um, classification, and different ways of writing. All right. And so all of these are different styles, are different objectives, or different tasks that you will all put together, that you'll put together in a final essay. Okay, in all your essays, really, we'll have like narrative chunks. You'll have comparison and contrast chunks. Okay, you'll have process analysis chunks. All right, these are all different modes of writing that go into your essay. All right. And so each of our essays will use a few of these modes. And then essay 3 is supposed to be a much longer essay than your previous essays. Every essay is supposed to get longer, longer, and longer. And so by the end with essay 3, you'll be using like 5 different modes of writing in your paper, which actually makes writing the paper so much easier. Sometimes people hear a 5-page essay and they're like, oh my God, 5 pages. But then when you're like, okay, well, I got to have a paragraph that's cause and effect. I got to have a paragraph that's process analysis. I got to have a paragraph that is a narrative. Then really it just becomes individual paragraphs that you're writing that all share the same topic, but different style. So you're not sitting down and writing 5 pages at once. You're sitting down and writing a different mode, using a different mode to write a different paragraph each time. Okay. So using modes and understanding the different ways of communicating information. Like this paragraph is an example. This paragraph, I'm going to use cause and effect. This paragraph, I'm going to use classification. Then that really breaks down the steps. Okay. It's kind of like sometimes, if you had to climb a building straight up, that looks overwhelming. But if that building was actually a pyramid made of steps, it's much easier to climb because you're just doing one step at a time versus this straight up thing that you have to try to get up. Okay, so don't freak out. But all this, everything we're doing always builds up to first like paper 1, but also we're building up to paper 3 at the same time. When we finish paper 1, then we're going to be working on things that lead up to paper 2, but we're also doing things that are leading up to paper 3 at the same time. Essay 3 is always present in everything we're doing. All right. Essentially, essay 1 is a chunk of essay 3, and essay 2 is a chunk of essay 3. Even though essay 3 is about something completely different, the type of writing that we're doing in essay 1 and the type of writing we're doing in essay 2 leads to the types of writing we're doing in essay 3. Okay, so these are all connected. All right, so first one is narrative. Narrative, using a story to make a point. This is not creative writing. I love creative writing, but this is not creative writing. Using a narrative is meant to use a short story element, a story-like element in your nonfiction writing. It shouldn't be fictional because if it is, it's autobiographical. Okay, it's not writing a short story. All right. Not emphasizing character development or plot devices. Okay. The purpose is to make a point. It's not to entertain. It can be entertaining, but that's not the point. All right. If it becomes humorous, if it is silly, if you're making fun of yourself, those are all great things. As long as you have a bigger purpose. All right. A reasoning for writing it. So like there will be a narrative aspect to this first paper that you write. And so you will include sort of a bit of a narrative portion of it, and it should apply to your topic. Okay. And so but of course, they're like, if it is engaging, if it is entertaining, if it is those things, then awesome. But it also needs to mostly focus or relate to the topic of what you're discussing or the point you're trying to make. And I say that because, like, you know, it's not easy to be entertaining. It's not an easy thing. So in this class, we don't it's not designed to teach you how to be entertaining. If you have the natural ability to have a strong and entertaining voice in your paper, then you should do it. Yes. And if you can make it a more entertaining, which is what I think you'll see in Trevor Noah's piece that you'll read this week, that is fantastic. But there are some people, a lot of people out there who are just not naturally entertaining writers. And so I don't want those of you who are not naturally an engaging writer to feel like insecure about your writing, because technically the goal is not to be entertaining. The goal is to use a real life example, essentially, to personally relate to the topic at hand, because that makes what you're talking about more relatable to other people. Okay. And you can do that in a serious way or a straight to the point kind of way. All right. And then also, using narrative is not telling a story in the entire essay. Okay. So most of you, I'm gonna have you. So I'm gonna pretty much have all of you begin your essay for essay one. Introduction will be set up like a story. All right. It will set up the personal aspect to the topic in which you'll be discussing. All right. And then usually the conclusion will bring you back to that narrative aspect of the introduction and talk about what you learn from it. Okay. All right. So here's an example. This is from Judith Ortiz Coffer's essay, "The Myth of the Latin Woman." Here we go. Another facet of the myth of the Latin woman in the United States is the menial, the domestic Maria, the housemaid or counter girl. It's true that work as domestics, as waitresses, and in factories is all that's available to women with little English and few skills. But the myth of the Hispanic menial, the funny maid, mispronouncing words and cooking up a spicy storm in a shiny California kitchen, has been perpetuated by the media in the same way that Mammy from Gone with the Wind became America's idea of the Black woman for generations. Since I do not wear my diplomas around my neck for all to see, I have on occasion been sent to that, quote, kitchen, where some think I obviously belong. One incident has stayed with me, though I recognize it as a minor offense. My first public poetry reading took place in Miami at a restaurant where a luncheon was being held before the event. I was nervous and excited as I walked in with my notebook in hand. An older woman motioned me to her table, and thinking, foolish me, that she wanted me to autograph a copy of my newly published slender volume of verse, I went over. She ordered a cup of coffee from me, assuming I was the waitress. Easy enough to mistake my poems for menus, I suppose. I know it wasn't an intentional act of cruelty, yet of all the good things that happened later, I remember that scene most clearly because it reminded me of what I had to overcome before anyone would take me seriously. In retrospect, I understand that my anger gave my reading fire. In fact, I've almost always taken any doubt in my abilities as a challenge, the result most often of being the satisfaction of winning a convert, of seeing the cold, appraising eyes warm to my words, the body language change, the smile that indicates I have opened some avenue for communication. So that day, as I read, I looked directly at that woman. Her lowered eyes told me she was embarrassed at her faux pas. And when I willed her to look up at me, she graciously allowed me to punish her with my full attention. We shook hands at the end of the reading, and I never saw her again. She has probably forgotten the entire incident, but maybe not. Yet, I am one of the lucky ones. There are thousands of Latinas without the privilege of an education or the entries into society that I have. For them, life is a constant struggle against the misconceptions perpetuated by the myth of the Latina. My goal is to try to replace the old stereotypes with a much more interesting set of realities. Every time I give a reading, I hope the stories I tell, the dreams and fears I examine in my work can achieve some universal truth that will get my audience past the particulars of my skin color, my accent, or my clothes. Okay, so that is Coffer using narrative. She's talking about a bigger issue about essentially the stereotypes of being a Latina woman in America, and how that has sort of like plagued her or haunted her throughout her entire life in America. And so then she provides this little narrative about a time that where she was mistaken as a waitress instead of as the poet that people came there to see. I mean, what? So, yeah, and then she returns back to her analysis. Okay, so like her little narrative section is in between the setup and an analysis. All right, definition. Definition, a rhetorical style that explains the meaning of a term, idea, or concept. Definition may be used for an entire essay, but is often used as a rhetorical style within an essay that may mix other rhetorical styles. Often used to coin a new term, an evolving term, or redefine an outdated term. This week you're going to be reading a chapter from Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. While this example is not in that section that you're going to read, this is from his book also. This is he's defining apartheid because he talks about it so much in his memoir. Apartheid was a police state, a system of surveillance and laws designed to keep Black people under total control. A full compendium of those laws would run more than 3,000 pages and weigh approximately 10 pounds. But the general thrust of it should be easy enough for any American to understand. In America, you had the forced removal of the native onto reservations, coupled with slavery, followed by segregation. Imagine all three of those things happening to the same group of people at the same time. That was apartheid. All right, so that's him defining apartheid for us so we understand it, and then also using kind of an example for us to be able to better understand it. Okay. These are best when like you are almost redefining things or getting people to understand things. So like, for example, ghetto. If someone wanted to write about ghetto, it would be great to kind of go to the original definition of ghetto. How like right now we have this idea of a ghetto as in being the stereotypical place where low income people of color live, and often refers to neighborhoods that have been run down, and it's used in a way to blame those who live in those areas and to imply high crime and low quality, and again, generally people in minority groups. And so ghetto in America has a long history of sort of these continually to perpetuate racial stereotypes. But then if you were to write about the true definition of ghetto, then and want to, not redefine it, but like re-emphasize the original definition of ghetto and trace its lineage back, it would go back to World War II, where the ghettos were the term used for the pre-concentration camp encampments of Jewish people in Germany. Similar to what he writes here about the forced removal put on reservations, essentially when the Jewish people of Germany were rounded up and they were forced to live in these certain designated areas of Germany in the cities. Those were called ghettos, and so they were the pre-stop, the pre-place before moving into concentration camps. And so this sociologist from America went over to Germany and kind of just studied and this was happening for like a decade before the Holocaust officially started. And he was studying the social makeup of Germany and Berlin, and understanding this term ghetto, and where we have this like this like forced encampment areas of Jewish people. And so what he wrote about was later he wrote about the American ghettos, which he, in his eyes, felt that the way that the Germans were treating the Jewish people, it was the same way, equivalent to the way America was treating Black people in America. And so he brought this term ghetto to as a way to critique American society for how they were treating Black people. He was making, an analogy to the Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany is to the Jews as the American government is to Black people in the 1940s and 50s. So he was trying to make this connection, right? And so what's crazy is that over time, while the term ghetto should actually be criticizing the American government and for the way it treated Black people, instead somehow it over time has become stamped to the foreheads of Black people and being used in a racist way to refer to their neighborhoods now. So a re-examination of the definition of a term can be very powerful for us to look at how that definition has changed over decades. Okay. So that's one example for definition. There's an essay that you could find out that it might even be, I think it's in our textbook if you wanted to read it. The Ways We Lie by Stephanie Erickson. I'm not really going to read this right now, but you can read it in the notes. She goes through the white lie, facades. I'm pretty sure she's a therapist. So she talks about the ways that people try to like justify the lying in their lives and stuff, deflecting, dismissal, delusion. All right. All of these are different ways in which people try to justify lying in their life. And they want to almost like redefine, like, I'm not really like, doing anything bad because, I'm just doing this. And she's like, no. Like delusional, dismissal. These are still, ways in which people lie. So that's pretty interesting. All right. Exemplification. So this is when you just provide examples to prove a point. They can be hypothetical examples or they are real examples. Kind of like when I just used an example when I was talking about definition, and I was talking about the German ghettos and the connection between the Germans and Jews in America and Black people during the Jim Crow South specifically. That was an example. I mean, exemplification is almost the easiest one to always be using because it's most people need an example in order to like see things in their head. Okay. Usually these begin with like a generalization about the topic. And then once you take a generalization, you expand upon it with examples. Also, exemplification is very similar to narrative because usually the narrative part of your essay is the example that you're using to set up your argument or to prove your argument. Okay. So Coffer's essay about the myth of the Latino woman is she is both a narrative and exemplification because she's literally using herself as an example. Okay. Here's another example, though. Here's an example of exemplification from this is from a book called Untangled: Guiding Teenage Girls through the 7 Transitions of Adulthood by Lisa DeMore. All right. So it begins here with this example of Wizard of Oz. So this is from a chapter called Contending with Adult Authority. You know the scene in The Wizard of Oz when Toto pulls back the curtain and reveals that the great and powerful Oz is just a guy frantically pulling levers behind a curtain? Well, if we put your daughter in the role of Dorothy and you, my friend, in the place of the wizard, the scene perfectly explains why girls start to challenge adults, break rules, and engage in other forms of rebellion once they become teenagers. Before adolescence, girls don't see behind the curtain. They respect their elders and usually do as they're told. Children do push the limits, but they tend to go along with adults, especially if we get mad. When the curtain is pulled back, girls see that we aren't infallible. omnipotent wizards. In fact, we sometimes abuse our office and issue arbitrary rules. Once they're armed with this insight, it's hardly surprising that girls stop acquiescing to age given, rank, and start questioning our authority. Okay. So then let's skip this paragraph, blah, blah, blah. A particularly painful example. I mean, just here, the word example is a flag for exemplification of what happens when a parent insists that he's still the great and powerful wizard showed up in my private practice. For several months, I worked with Chloe, a poised, artsy teen whose parents divorced when she was 12. When Chloe was 17, her father, a man with an impressive track record of insensitive behavior, oh, that's a little bit of sarcasm there, married a woman who prided herself on her cooking. Chloe, a vegetarian who enjoyed a terrific variety of healthy foods, spent Tuesday evenings and alternate weekends with her dad and stepmother. And on her first visit to their new home, Chloe's stepmother served chicken cacciatore. Chloe quietly focused on eating her vegetables until her father, but interestingly, not her stepmother, pressed her to share in the main course. Despite Chloe's protests that she hadn't eaten meat in over a year, her father insisted that she was being rude to her stepmother by refusing to eat what was served and threatened to take her phone if she didn't give in. Chloe stood her ground, and her father took her phone. I'm sure that I don't have to tell you that taking a teenager's phone, especially at age 17, amounts to a very severe punishment. Chloe hung in for 2 weeks until she could no longer get along without her phone. She choked down a few bites of meat on the nights she ate at her dad's house, got her phone back, and toughed it out for a month until she turned 18. The divorce agreement did not require Chloe to stick to the visitation plan once she became an adult in the eyes of the law. So after her birthday, Chloe packed her bags, moved out of her father's house, and stayed full-time with her mother. Chloe's mom empathized with Chloe's position, all the while worried about the harm her ex-husband, had done to his relationship with their daughter. Okay, so this uses an example from this woman's counseling. Now, of course, this girl's name is not really Chloe. Obviously, they're all been changed and stuff, right? But she fills her book full of examples from her real life practice. She's a therapist, an adolescent therapist. So she will teach a lesson to the adults and then provide an example. Sometimes they're positive examples. Sometimes they're negative examples. Okay. So that's a good type of writing as well. All right. She's explaining something and then she's using examples to demonstrate it. All right. So that is the end of part 1. I've gone over narrative, definition, exemplification. Okay. In part 2, I'm going to go over, I cut that one. We're going to go over tone and audience and theme. Okay. We're going to talk about these 2 pieces, Lone Survivor and American Sniper. And I'll go over the homework and I'll go over all that kind of stuff. So you can go ahead and start watching part 2 if you would like to, or you can wait and work on something else and then come back to and then watch part 2, whatever you need to do. All right. Let me know if you have any questions about the things I discussed in this one right here. All right. Bye-bye.